Hello, everyone. This is this week's episode of The Narrative, and we have a fantastic guest this week to sort of talk about the themes that we usually like to talk about. The leader of the New Blue Party of Ontario, Jim Karahalios, is on with us, and he's going to talk with us about starting the new provincial party in Ontario, how the party is going to operate going ahead into the 2022 provincial election, and just the issues that he's sort of run into recently with having to restate his credibility in the face of people looking to sort of pull Ontario politics in another direction. So if you want to maybe introduce yourself, Jim, to any of our listeners who might not know who you are yet, that'd be great.
Jim Karahalios, New Blue Party leader, co-founder. My wife is the MPP for the riding of Cambridge, Belinda Karahalios. I think that's a good introduction. What do you guys think? We just jump right into it?
Yeah, sure. That's all probably people really need, since I think we're going to detail things out pretty well. So you started the New Blue Party early 2021, or you at least had it certified in early 2021 after Belinda was removed from the party in late, I believe it was like November or October 2020 for voting against Bill 195, the Reopening Ontario Act. And sort of since then, what has it sort of been like starting a new party from scratch?
So there were years of trying to fix the Ontario PC party from the inside, starting with Patrick Brown's reversal on a carbon tax and vote rigging and internal party politics and nominations where there's no laws preventing people from stuffing ballot boxes when picking their candidates for a general election. PC party sued me in 2017. I beat them in court in 2 weeks. I think it was the first time a private citizen had been sued by a political party in Canadian history, and the first time a private citizen beat a political party in court. And fast forward, Doug Ford becomes the leader of the Ontario PC party. My wife becomes the MPP for Cambridge. She won in a 2.5-week nomination, and she won in a general election. But in 2020, July, she got kicked out of caucus for being the only current or former PC MPP to vote against Doug Ford's lockdown bill 195. And 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, the PC executive wiped out the entire Cambridge PC board undemocratically, didn't even follow the party constitution. And they made it really clear that there was no chance of Belinda running in a PC nomination or being able to run for the PC party in the next election. It was interesting because Roman Baber, when he later got kicked out, and Randy Hillier, who got kicked out in 2019 for apparently saying yada, yada, yada to some parents of autism, they were allowed to stay on their PC board. But when she got kicked out in July and August of 2020, we had all kinds of people across Ontario, supporters and others, saying this isn't right, the way the provincial politics and government is working in Ontario, and these political parties, you just got to toe the party line, do what the leader says. This isn't representation. And a lot of people said to her, you got to run again. And then they said, but I can't support you from Northern Ontario, Eastern Ontario, the GTA, or Southwestern Ontario unless I live in Cambridge. You need to start another party. So we got a lot of feedback, and she came up with the name of the New Blue Party. There's some history there if you guys got time. I don't know if you knew that the Conservative Party of Canada, I didn't know this actually until we read up on it. The Conservative Party of Canada was created from a merger of two parties, and one of the parties was called the Blue Party. I think it was the early 1900s. And so there's some history behind Blue Party, and we're not that party, but we're the New Blue Party. And it's really hard to come up with a name in Ontario provincial politics because it can't sound like any other party. So you can't use the word conservative. You can't use the word libertarian. Freedom was taken. There's all kinds of little parties that are using other terms and similar names. So New Blue, like 2 words, 7 characters, like perfectly defines what we are. And there's some history. And we registered the name in September of 2020. The end of September, and in 2.5 weeks, Elections Ontario got back to us, gave us the green light to use the name, and then we had to get over 1,000 signatures to register the party. The feedback was phenomenal. As soon as we put a video out saying we got approval to use the name, we got the 2,000 signatures in, I don't know, a couple weeks. We submitted them to Elections Ontario Stage 2. They take a minimum of 3 months to audit the list. So they actually contact everyone who signed. And by January of 2021, we got the green light. We filed the final third stage paperwork identifying the leaders. And we were registered in January. I was in the middle of a struggle with osteosarcoma. It was the same cancer that took Terry Fox's life. But after 6 rounds of chemo and 3 surgeries, I'm back on my feet as of the end of the summer, I guess fall, walking without an aid, and we're full steam ahead. And we've done a lot of the groundwork building a solid party. We almost have riding associations registered in every single riding in Ontario, which is a great accomplishment. We've just been having Zoom meetings with our presidents this week, getting everyone up to the same on the same page going forward. So we're really excited, and the candidate application is going to be up in a couple of days. We've had people for months saying, "How can I apply to be a candidate? I want to be a candidate." People are really eager to go, and so things are looking in the right direction. We got members and donors in every riding across Ontario, so I can talk more about it. But do you guys know who the first person I talked to about starting a political party in Ontario was?
Who?
It actually wasn't my wife. It was Randy Hillier. Can you believe it?
And how did that go?
I stumped you guys. Like, you guys are like, you don't know what to say. Like,
Yeah.
So a week before my wife got kicked out of caucus, I reached out to Randy because Randy looks like a really unassuming, honest guy, right? Like, he's just a nice guy, Randy. He wouldn't fool you. He wouldn't betray you if you tell him something, right? That's what I thought. No, I was wrong. I reached out to Randy, and you guys cover federal politics. I was in that leadership against Aaron O'Toole, warning everyone, Aaron O'Toole's a disaster. No one was believing me. Well, that's not true. A lot of people in the Conservative Party membership list were believing me because I got so close to Aaron O'Toole, they kicked me out of the leadership. And the people that were running that federal leadership were predominantly Caroline Mulroney's team from her provincial leadership, really influential backroom guys. So I went and had lunch with Randy in July of 2020 in Toronto, went all the way from Cambridge to Toronto. I said, Randy, why aren't you going to work? Why aren't you doing anything? We've had lockdowns for 4 months. You're so quiet. Are you going to run again? Why aren't you taking over one of these little parties? And he said, I don't care anymore. I'm done. I'm a 14-year guy. I don't care. Starting a new party is a lot of work. And I said, I'm really worried that they're going to kick my wife out of the PC party right before the next election in 2022, just like they did to Tanya Granite-Gallen. They caught her off guard. She didn't have time to bounce back. And I said, I got to keep my eyes and ears open because I don't want them to do that to my wife and devastate her on the eve of a campaign. And I said, if you get a whisper of that, Randy, can you let me know? Oh, no, I haven't heard anything of that, Jim. And I said, and if she does want to run again, if she gets kicked out, would you consider a new party if we're forced to do that? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to start a party, Jim, but if you do it, let's talk about it. Oh, okay. That's great, Randy. But Randy told me over that lunch, he's good friends with Nick Kouvalis, Ford's top pollster and lobbyist, and high regard he holds for Paul Calandra, the House Leader. What a great job Paul Calandra does. And I don't like to repeat private conversations, but 1 week later, my wife gets kicked out of the party and 17, 18 of us get kicked out of the riding association. And the very next day, a staffer at party headquarters, PC party headquarters, calls our riding president in Cambridge on the PC side, who's a good friend of the family at this point, and says to him, I know Jim is starting a political party. And so my friend calls me, who's the riding president, says, are you thinking of starting a political party and you didn't call me and tell me about it? And my wife says, you have plans to start a political party? I said, no, I don't have plans. It was a concept idea that came up over lunch with Randy Hillier. And they both said to me, really? Yeah. So Randy was the only person that I brought the idea up to. And somehow PC party headquarters found out. Isn't that interesting?
That's not weird at all. I'll also just to note here, an odd thing is that Randy Hillier, back in that conversation, I will assume it to be true based on the evidence that sort of surrounding the like sort of the PC party, like we're dissolving the Cambridge Riding Association. But it strikes me as odd that Randy Hillier was not willing to put in the effort to start his own party back then. But suddenly, when we're very close to the next election, now he suddenly wants to start a party when very well he could submit all of his signatures, all of his paperwork to form a new party, and it's probably not even registered by the time the election day comes around. Like even Derek Sloan, who is starting the True North Party, he's still waiting on signatures to be verified because government bureaucrats don't tend to be very quick in doing these sorts of things.
Well, provincially, it takes 4 or 5 months to register a party from the time you start, and you got to go straight through without any hiccups, right, on the audit of signatures. And ours was just right through, like we didn't have any hiccups. But he wasn't motivated back then, Wyatt. Now he's motivated because he's got a deal with the Ontario PCs. Because I told you Belinda got kicked out. 2.5 weeks later, Brian Patterson, the fake president of the PCs, who only has the position because they rigged a convention, calls a conference call of the PC executive to vote Belinda, me, and 18 others off the PC board. And someone on the call says, why aren't we getting rid of Randy? And the response from Brian Patterson was, Randy's not a concern. We have a deal with Randy. It was actually backwards. It was, we have a deal with Randy. Randy's not a concern. And so Randy's had a deal with them for a while. And I wasn't really sure what the parts of the deal were. But when we started New Blue, registered the name, we made it really clear that when Randy unwinds being on the PC Party Riding Association that he is, and he's in control of, and is interested in parting ways with the PC Party, and he wants to go to work and he wants to show up to work, that we'd welcome him in a conversation to come over. Randy told me flat out in October of 2020, not interested, not coming. He had 5 MPPs from the PC side lined up to start a new party. Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. We're still waiting. I don't see the 5. I don't see the 5. You guys see the 5? I don't see the 5. So he said no. And then Randy became an activist. So after the New Blue Party was registered and a thing and existed, then Randy realized we had a lockdown. Because from March to October, Randy didn't notice there was a lockdown. And he went and took over the No More Lockdowns campaign. He didn't bother going to Queen's Park to vote against the lockdown bill.
Right.
Roman Baber voted for it. Belinda was the only one that was in the PC caucus, or used to be in the PC caucus, to vote against it. He didn't back Belinda up on her getting kicked out. He doesn't go to Queen's Park to hold the Ford government to account on any issues from the right side of the spectrum. But then in October, when we announced, Randy realized there was a lockdown, guys. Yeah. He didn't realize 6 months.
He also realized that he just absolutely loves suspenders. It's very funny to see pictures of Randy Hillier before his activist phase and after his activist phase. Since he's done that, he's sort of donned the suspenders and become the sort of outspoken, loud conservative, even though, you know, like, he has a history of being a very deep red Tory. Like, if people read the article that came out from the National Telegraph, we sort of did a report on the history of Randy Hillier throughout the pandemic and beforehand. And beforehand, he's like a extremely red Tory, supports what's her name? Why am I forgetting Elliott's name? First name. Christine Elliott. There we go. There we go. Christine Elliott, he was a big supporter of one of her leadership campaigns. He was a supporter of the Ontario Landowners Association before he got elected, in which case he threw them under the bus as right-wing nutcases or nut bars or whatever he said. But now suddenly a lot of people are out there assuming that Randy's completely genuine. This is the real Randy. The real Randy decided to emerge in 2020, not since 2007 when he was first elected. And that's what has been really frustrating me in the response to any allegations or any evidence, actually, of Randy Hillier being kind of like controlled opposition.
He most definitely has a deal with the PCs. Like, any way you cut it, if you look at your article, covered a lot of it, but there's a lot that I haven't said to the story. He said he wasn't interested in provincial politics. He said he didn't want to be part of the New Blue. He went off and started an anti-lockdown caucus the End the Lockdown Caucus with specific instructions that I not be invited to it. And then he went around smearing me saying, Jim and Belinda won't join the caucus that we weren't invited to. We also had concerns regarding how is this caucus going to operate? Because I know Randy's history and I know how PC operatives work in these deals. And what they do is they get opponents to the party to say ridiculous things and discredit the entire movement. But at the same time, that person gets a lot of attention. So when he was running the Landowners Association in Ontario, he would do wild things and he would do highway block-offs and get a lot of attention. And he rode that all the way into a nomination in elected office. And as soon as he was in there for 14 years, he went the other way. He became a red Tory. He betrayed the landowners. He called them, like Wyatt said, nut bars, and I think something else, because they were talking about the United Nations influence on local laws. So it's kind of interesting that 14 years ago he was doing these provocative things. Then when he was in office, he didn't really take a stand on anything. Nothing bothered him. Nothing. Ballot box stuffing inside the PC party, nothing from Randy. Carbon tax being in favor, nothing from Randy. All these issues, he didn't care. He didn't care at all. But then all of a sudden in October of 2020, after we announced the New Blue Party, he's good friends with Nick Kouvalis. Then all of a sudden he starts doing this anti-lockdown activism. Make sure that we don't get invited to rallies. He invites Belinda to a Queen's Park rally. Belinda goes in November of 2020. He says to her, she's not allowed to talk. He comes to Waterloo Region for a rally at Waterloo Town Square. One of the people there organizing with him say, invite Belinda. He doesn't invite Belinda. Randy doesn't want us to talk at that rally. He makes room in his anti-lockdown caucus for the leader of the Freedom Party, who's kind of a left-wing freedom type. And only then is it allowed that leaders of parties that are not elected are allowed to go into the anti-lockdown caucus. Many months later, after he said ridiculous things. So I thought he was checking out of provincial politics, doing activism, and then he went into federal politics. He spent an entire month campaigning for his daughter, who was running for the PPC in southwestern Ontario. And I thought, okay, well, I'll leave him alone. There's no point of, talking about this stuff and his deal with the PCs and the way they changed the election laws to allow him to create an independent riding association so he can get a taxpayer subsidy of $66,000 and change. By the way, the PCs and Randy Hillier's independent riding association double dip, like Wyatt said in the article, and each get the amount. So that was one part of the deal to benefit Randy. Talk about wasting taxpayer money, right? So
why don't you explain that a little bit more in detail? Because when I read it in Wyatt's article, I thought it's really ridiculous, because if it's a per vote subsidy, then the riding association should get it back, or one person should get it. But now two parties are getting it, and Randy is getting it for his independent riding association, which has nothing to do with how he got elected in 2018. So you want to touch on that a little bit for the audience?
Absolutely. So it's fascinating, right? Because from November 2020, Randy doesn't go to work. He doesn't go to Queen's Park. And he claims, he's getting paid $116,000 a year. And he claims, or his daughter claims, because his daughter's the one defending him online, because he won't defend himself. And he's okay with smearing me privately in conversations, but he won't have a public debate or enter a leadership race. But the claim is he can't go to Queen's Park because they make you wear a mask at Queen's Park and they make you do a test, right? That's the claim, right? But did you guys notice in the federal race, he's getting paid $116,000 a year from provincial taxpayers, but he's campaigning federally. He went to Alberta, right, to campaign for the PPC in September, a couple of days before Election Day. How did he get to Alberta? Did he drive or did he fly? And when he flew, did he wear a mask? Did he do a test? How come it's okay? He cared to wear the mask and do the test and follow COVID protocols to campaign federally while he's getting paid by provincial taxpayers, but he doesn't care enough to do the antigen test or to wear a mask at Queen's Park to vote against Bill 195 or Bill 12 on mandatory vaccinations or Roman Baber's Jobs and Jabs bill. Belinda cares enough to go while her husband's at home sick with cancer, but Randy doesn't care because Randy doesn't believe it. And so people ask, what's the deal that Randy's getting from the PCs, right? What's
Well,
this deal that Brian Patterson said? So
I've noticed that he's actually been trying to basically edit history on Twitter. Like he said a couple of things about it, and what he did with the whole issue with him not being able to vote in the legislature is he went in with the face shield to prove that, oh, I'm not allowed in here, and he was acting as if that was the moment he stopped showing up to Queen's Park, and that's the moment why he didn't show up anymore. He stopped showing up on November 25th, 2020, and then he did 2 votes in 2021, and then he claimed that the restrictions were too harsh after he did the second vote or during the second vote, even though there was about a 5-month gap before he actually voted again during 2021. He's basically done nothing, but now he's sort of saying like, no, retroactively it was because of the masking rule, even though that didn't really bother him for the longest time, and he wasn't showing up to prove that he wasn't allowed in the first place. That was sort of what's bothering me. And then on the Bill 254 stuff, he's saying, well, I didn't benefit at all from it, despite the fact that he's also saying that he helped negotiate that bill, and he was the one who helped to convince the PCs to pass it, which is a little bit odd. Why would you negotiate hard for something when you're barely showing up at all for something that doesn't benefit you?
But also, why would he then PCs be negotiating with him if they hate his guts and they kicked him out of caucus and his persona non grata? Well, all of a sudden now they're negotiating with him like he's a friend. Like that doesn't make logical sense at all.
You guys are even making it. You guys are kind of defending him because that's not even what he said on that Twitter rebuttal. So let's get to it. Okay. So people ask, what's the deal that Randy has, right? Brian Patterson said on this call, he has a deal. They have a deal with Brian Patterson, right? I mean, with Randy Hillier. So we're sitting there. I'm in the middle of my chemo treatments. It's March, April. I've just had a 12-hour surgery. I'm in the middle of chemo. My leg is all messed up. And Randy claims he called Belinda in March to have a meeting about a political party, about getting involved in New Blue. And Belinda said, sure, let's have the talk. And I mean, well, that's interesting. Maybe Randy's deal with the PCs has ended and he's ready to get off his PC Riding Association. And of course, Randy knows because it's in the emails. You guys knew if you get the emails. Most people knew that follow New Blue. I was in no condition to go to a meeting in March after a 12-hour surgery. And so we said, yeah, when Jim's back up on his feet, we'll have a meeting. But in April, the PCs come out with this piece of legislation and they're changing the election laws to do a couple things. The first thing is Doug Ford's doubling the limit that someone can donate to a political party from $1,650 to $3,300. Okay, fine. Doug wants to raise as much money in the PC party as possible because those lobbyists running the party, they need to make a lot of coin. But then they changed the law to do a couple things. First, for the first time in Canadian history, Ontario history, an independent MPP, Randy Hillier, can now create a riding association and raise money and issue political tax credits. When before, you had to have a political party to do that. As an independent, you could only raise money during the month before the campaign. So that's the first change. So think about it. If Randy Hillier is opposition, why are the PCs changing the law to benefit him?
Right.
The second thing they do, hold on, Wyatt. The second thing they do is they change the law and they bring back this liberal taxpayer subsidy, per vote subsidy, this liberal idea that Doug said he was going to get rid of. He increases it from $1 something to $2.54 a vote. But they also say if you are now an independent MPP, you get the subsidy in your independent riding association, and the party you came from also gets the subsidy based on the same vote total. So they went ahead and they let Randy Hillier start an independent riding association and give him $66,000 a year into that riding association. Why? Why would they do that? So you guys talked about his rebuttal online, but let's go through the rebuttal because you got to really be clear on the rebuttal, right? And it's 4 points in the rebuttal. I won a constitutional argument that permits all independent MPP candidates to raise funds and have the same rule as party candidates. That is false. Totally false. All independent MPP candidates, no, only independent MPPs can get this independent riding association. And it's not just about raising funds. They get a subsidy. That's what they get. He did not win a constitutional argument. There was no court case. There was no judge's decision. And there's no basis in constitutional law for claiming that. And furthermore, if it was a constitutional argument, Why was the law drafted in such a way so that an MPP like Belinda, who started a new party, gets $0 as a subsidy, but an independent MPP like Randy gets $66,000 a year? 3 months later, I think it was July or August, Randy registers the Randy Hillier Independent Riding Association. So now you're Jim and you're Belinda, and you're looking at this and you're like, wow, that was a pretty good deal if you're Randy, right? They let you sit on your PC board for over 2 years while they got rid of us and threatened to sue. And then for a soft landing, they give you an independent riding association with a nice, cushy subsidy of $66,000 a year. So then Randy's second rebuttal in the tweet was, I get no taxpayer subsidy. Well, Wyatt's article didn't say he gets a taxpayer subsidy. It said his independent riding association gets a taxpayer subsidy, which he registered. And the third point of his tweet was, the PC Riding Association kept all the money I raised. I don't think Wyatt's article said that Randy took any of the money. It merely said that he sat there for 2.5 years as a member of the PC party and was able to raise and spend money as expenses while we got dusted in 14 or 17 days after Belinda got kicked out. But you know what's interesting about his 3-point rebuttal, and I'll turn it back over to you guys. Nowhere in the Twitter rebuttal does he say, I don't have a deal with the PCs. Mm-hmm. Nowhere in the Twitter rebuttal does he say, I'm not controlled opposition. Mm-hmm. Nowhere in the Twitter rebuttal does he directly refuse any of the points in Wyatt's article. And you know why? Because he has a deal with the PCs, because he's controlled opposition, and his entire agenda for a year was to be a ridiculous anti-lockdown activist, to discredit the movement, and now to start a political party at the last minute in order to divert attention from the New Blue, because Doug Ford and the PCs are really, really worried we're going to run candidates in every riding.
But he hasn't even started a party yet. It's only words out of his mouth. There's no evidence that he's even started a party.
At the announcement, which was not supposed to be an announcement for his new party, it was just like a prayer meeting on a Sunday. They were literally handing around a clipboard for people to start signing up for it. So it was pretty much, the idea was hatched that afternoon. But the thing I found the thing I find really suspicious that people don't investigate for themselves is that with Bill 254, when he's saying that he won a constitutional argument, I'm like, well, when was he making that argument? I know the bill was, I think, somewhere it was like filed before he stopped showing up to Queen's Park, but the whole point is he was negotiating while he wasn't going to Queen's Park. Well, who was he negotiating with during that time? Well, it's only going to be the PCs. He's not going to rely on the NDP and the Liberals to pass it. They have no ability to. For him to get that past the finish line, he has to be working with the PCs in some way. And then people are just sort of overlooking the fact that Belinda was the only MPP left out of that bill. And then they're also pretending as if, well, if the money doesn't go directly in his pocket, he doesn't benefit from it at all. Like you would know yourself that if you are an MPP on a riding association and you're getting taxpayer subsidies for the riding association, you can use it to cover activities that you would maybe had to cover with your own money. It's being able to raise your political profile. It is benefiting you, but just saying it's benefiting you doesn't mean it has to be going into your bank account. But people are trying to obfuscate the point by finding little technicalities of why Randy's behavior is okay. Like, I still haven't found a singular justification for why it's okay for him to appear as a conservative yet attack people for not going along with Kathleen Wynne's like kind of radical sex ed curriculum, rather vulgar sex ed curriculum. So
Doug Ford and Randy Hillier are a product of the same PC culture. Randy was there for 14 years. Doug's dad was an MPP, and the culture in the PC party is all about deception and backroom deals. And if you're not willing to go into a backroom negotiation, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. If it's about debating things in public or having public positions, they don't like it. And you know why you're saying all these people are defending him? I don't really see it. I see a bunch of people on Twitter that are a bunch of deceivers, and they like the deceptive politics that Randy and Doug Ford practice. Their only issue is that they're not in the PC party. And if the PC party opened the door for them tomorrow and said, come on in, let's have a private meeting, you guys will cut you a deal too, they'd go running. And let me tell you about the deceptive politics that Randy and his team have been up to for a while. 2 months ago, they started telling people on a whisper campaign, smearing me, smearing Belinda. They were saying, we're going to start the PPC Ontario. We're going to run on the brand because the brand is so good, because PPC did better federally. And then when the announcement came, there was no PPC Ontario. There was no People's Party of Ontario. Why? Why aren't they using the name? Why was it such a great idea to use the name? Because it was a brand, but now all they got in the brand is the color purple. Like it's like a Prince album. It's the color purple, and that's it. There's no brand. So that's the one deception. The other deception is the people circling Randy 2 months ago after the federal election. There's some guy named Sill that ran for the PPC next door to us. There's another guy named Brian in Southwestern Ontario. There's another dude named Jim, unfortunately, he has the same name as me. You know what these guys were saying right after the federal election? They were hammering on the Facebook, messaging me, Jim, I want to run for the New Blue. I want to run. Please don't forget about me. I can win for the New Blue. Please, please, me. And then as soon as they heard from their masters that there might be a PPC party, oh boy, they were all ready. No, they were gone. They were done from New Blue. And now it's the purple party. It's not even the PPC party. It's a party with the color purple, and maybe it'll have a Prince song as their theme. I don't know what they're going to have, but that's all they got. And so my question to the viewers is this. How can you trust these guys that are lining up to run for Randy when in 2 weeks they change their mind on committing to run for a political party? Like on the one hand, they're telling you they're going to start a party called PPC Ontario, and 2 weeks later it changes. On the one hand, they're smearing me and Belinda in a whisper campaign. They're not willing to do that publicly. On the one hand, they say, I want to run New Blue and I'm going to buy a membership in New Blue and I support New Blue. And 2 weeks later, they get instructions from a regional organizer on the PPC and they change their minds. So how do you know that they're going to represent you and stand on principle when the time comes in elected office? You don't, because they're deceivers. And they have no backbone and they have no principles and they don't stick to their convictions. And it's funny that some of these guys lining up to Randy, they say it's so terrible in our politics that these MPPs exist and they just do what the leader tells them, right? That's what they say. But then they're waiting for the nod from a PPC staffer who his name is Daniel. And if Daniel sends an email and says, go to Randy's party, they all say, yes, sir, I'll go to Randy's party. I'll ditch the membership in New Blue. I'll run over there. But we're supposed to believe that when they're an MPP, they're going to stand up to the machine and oppose the lockdown. We're supposed to believe they're not going to take instructions from one person at the top and do as they're told. I think they answered the question for everyone. They're just another version of the same old puppetry that we see, desperate to be elected, waiting to do what they're told to do, not willing to have the debate in public, and losing their nerve and their mind when Wyatt writes an article and posts it on the Telegraph.
Well, yeah, no, like a lot of them are still reacting. Earlier, I was, like when I was saying there's people on Twitter, I mean people who won't even post their real names on Twitter. There's maybe a couple of people actually will put their name out there in public to take actual criticism. But I actually want to ask a question to Richard to sort of prove a point here. Because I keep hearing people say, well, it's not controlled opposition. Like Randy's not controlled opposition. The Ontario First Party, it's not controlled opposition. Because they take this extremely narrow definition of what they believe controlled opposition is. And Richard, what would your personal definition be of controlled opposition?
Well, controlled opposition is where you have a main central party. So, for example, I've always felt that PPC and Bernier is essentially controlled opposition. So you have a central party, let's take PPC as an example, and let's use this as an example. I'm not saying that this is the case, but that'll be an example. So it really weakens the conservative vote, and it benefits Trudeau. So imagine if PPC and Bernier have a quiet, behind-the-scenes kind of a deal, and Bernier, he's never won a seat. He has all of his expenses and his salaries being paid for by donors to the PPC. Who knows who those donors may or may not be? I don't look through Election Canada payments, but basically you have a party which is there as a division, to create division and to weaken your opponent in order to benefit primary party. So say, for example, you could say the PPC is controlled opposition really to benefit Justin Trudeau, and
So
the Liberals.
yeah, there's no proof of that. Like, you have no evidence
No,
that the Liberals have a deal with Bernier.
no.
Bernier attacks O'Toole and he attacks the Liberals. But the controlled opposition, the pure definition, is when the person leading the movement that opposes the government has a deal with that government. And that is exactly what is going on with Randy Hillier. And the reason why governments use this, and it's amazing because people skeptical of the lockdown want politicians to tell the truth. Yes. And they're curious about government, right? And Randy has been an MPP for 14 years and nothing bothered him for the 14 years. He didn't see nothing wrong with government for 14 years. He didn't see ballot box stuffing in the PC party. He didn't see a problem with the carbon tax when the PCs flipped. But all of a sudden, he's got this deal with the PCs where they're changing election laws. And at the same time, he came out and 6 months into the lockdown, he started having a problem with the lockdown. And the reason why governments use figures to oppose their policies that they have a deal with is because they can ensure a couple of things. And in Randy's case, this is what's going on. He's going to make ridiculous statements. Like he's going to say, he's going to compare a third wave of COVID or a supposed third wave, like it was in the article, to the Third Reich. And he's going to use pictures of people who have passed away without the families given permission. And he's going to get himself in a lot of trouble. And then he's going to apologize after saying he's a tough guy, that he's not going to apologize, but he's going to apologize. And what does that do? It makes the Ford government look reasonable, and it makes the entire anti-lockdown movement look ridiculous and makes us look fringe and makes us look unhinged. So I'm supposed to believe that Randy Hillier doesn't go to work at Queen's Park, has voted on 2 things for a year, and even before that, a dozen things, doesn't go to work because he doesn't want to follow COVID protocols. He doesn't want to wear a mask. He doesn't want to take a test, even though he skipped the vote on the masking, Richard. They had a vote on it at Queen's Park, and he skipped it, and my wife just missed it because they timed it when she was just outside the legislature to do the vote. So he's never there for votes. But he cares enough to go to Alberta campaigning federally, wear a mask on a plane if he took a plane. He cares enough to take a test to get on a plane if he was required to do that to go to Alberta. But he doesn't care enough to go vote no to Bill 195, doesn't care enough to vote no to Bill 12 or vote in favor of Roman Baber's bill. And he also doesn't care enough to criticize the Ford government for not passing an anti-voter fraud bill that Belinda put forward, for subsidizing electrical vehicles, for bringing back a carbon tax when they said they weren't, for doing a taxpayer subsidy for political parties, which they said they wouldn't. He turns a blind eye to all those things, and he only talks about lockdowns and mandates in a general sense. And he's only attacked the Ford PCs now that Wyatt's article came out. Before that, there were a couple dozen times when he mentioned Doug Ford. Even at the announcement of his political party, that's not even set up yet and it's going to take months to get ready if he gets it registered, he didn't mention Ford or the PCs once in the entire speech. How can you be opposing a government and you're talking about the United Nations and Justin Trudeau more than you're talking about the government you're opposing?
Yeah. And and the thing is, the reason I asked Richard about what his personal definition of controlled opposition was to prove that it's not what people online are trying to say or what Randy supporters are trying to say, where unless you have a photo of Doug Ford and Randy Hillier shaking hands and he's going over to his house for lunch every single day, then it's not controlled opposition. And they're basically abstracting it or making it so oddly specific to the point where they can just sort of bat away any evidence of Randy clearly being in some relationship with Doug Ford's government. And to your point about saying ridiculous things, doing ridiculous things to alienate the general public, it's like, even just at the name of the new party, it's the Ontario First Party. The Ontario First Party, it's essentially named as closely to Canada First as humanly possible. And Canada First sounds good on its face. It's sort of like Black Lives Matter. It's a fine sentiment. But when you actually know the organization that's named after it, it's like it's an alt-right organization. And for some reason, Randy Hillier thought it was a great political move to name it after that. Or he doesn't think it's a great political move, and he's doing it because it's an obviously stupid thing to do. He has people on he's literally retweeting with the Ontario First Party's account, Canada First accounts like Canada First News and like other sorts of things like that. His daughter liked attacks on Twitter from Canada First on you when you were pointing out that Randy seems to be controlled opposition. It's basically a completely clownish operation, yet he's sort of acting as if to his supporters, unless you're acting as extreme as me, you're not a real conservative, even though he has no receipts to show that he's ever been a conservative.
But it's not about being a conservative.
Oh no, Jim accidentally dropped from the call right before he was going to say something. I think he should have the invite, so he should be able to come back in right there. But I guess you guys all get to be held in suspense until he does come back. But I just want to talk a little bit more about, like, I think I know what he was going to say. I'll still let him restate it when he comes back. But like, yeah, all of this stuff is not to be conservative. It's just to act conservative. It's all just performative, not real in any way. Sorry about that, Jim. You dropped right as you were about to drop.
So it's not about being a conservative, because he has the people behind him are people that weren't going to support the New Blue because they don't like right of center politics or blue principles. Like, he's got a guy that founded the marijuana party, Mark Emery. He's got another guy, Kyle, who is a member of the Green Party. He's got these other guys in Canada First. You know, there's some guy named Chad, and Chad puts on Facebook, you know, voting doesn't work. We need a military revolution. These are the kind of nut bars that Randy's got on his team. And they're calling for military revolutions in skinny jeans and baseball hats. But when my wife challenges Randy to a leadership race on the Rebel, Randy's not man enough to do a leadership race. So they claim to be all for a military revolution, but they can't even stomach a leadership race. They're scared of a leadership race. You can't handle a vote, or they can't handle when Jim does there's another guy named Daniel that works at PPC headquarters. And let's just get into the deception. Like, can we please get into the deception of what's going on? Because Wyatt brought up, how is he using the Ontario first name? And why are some of these PPC candidates, is another question, lining up with Randy? So one, they're lining up with Randy because they just think they're going to trick people by using the color purple, maybe play a Prince track, and they're going to deceive everyone, and they're going to think this is Max Bernier's party, and they're going to get the same vote total. That's not going to work. The other reason is he's got some of these PPC candidates that are pro-marijuana. They don't like that my wife stands up against a drug injection site. They don't like the fact that we say we're pro-life, whatever. These are kind of left-wing people that found their way right to Max's party because they weren't allowed to run in any other party. So they're with Randy. And then we got the military revolution guys who are tough enough to write stupid things on social media, but not brave enough to get into a leadership race. And the thing that all of these people have in common is that they're all deceivers. That's the thing that they have in common. They say that they're for free speech, but they lose their nerve when you have an opinion. This guy, Daniel, that works in the PPC, I was on a radio show a couple of days ago, and the radio host was asking me, like, what's the motivation of this staffer in the PPC to tell people in the PPC, give edicts and instructions, go run in Randy's party, even though Max and Martin Mass said we have an informal alliance with the New Blue. So these guys were trying to cozy up to us and say, let's do an informal alliance. And then they betray. And then the staffer at PPC headquarters runs an edict. This staffer, Daniel, used to be an anti-oil sands activist. He worked in, this is public, it's not secret, he's put it out there. The Rebel News called him out for being an anti-oil sands activist. And he advertised in his profile that he was working in the cannabis industry, right? So these are not right of center ideals. I'm on a radio show and I'm explaining to the radio host, my son calls this guy Daniel Tiger. It's a term of endearment. It's a cartoon for kids. And Daniel Tire, which is, I guess, his real name, it's not Daniel Tiger, it's Daniel Tire. So I apologize for calling him Daniel Tiger. He loses his mind on Twitter. Like, he's lost his nerve. So it was okay for 2 months for Randy Hillier to smear me and my wife, to say that stopping Bill 12 was political theater. It didn't matter to Ontarians. To get paid $116,000 to fly to Alberta to campaign, but not to go to work at Queen's Park, to basically rip off the taxpayer. That's okay. But if Jim has a couple of opinions, they lose their mind. They're not for free speech anymore. They get really upset about it. Here's another thing on the deception part, right? The Ontario First Party was registered by some guy named Paul in southwestern Ontario. And this guy, Paul, and his buddy Ken, when we announced the New Blue Party of Ontario, they got on the phone and they were on the phone with Jim and they said, Jim, we want to run in the New Blue. We want to get involved in the New Blue. I said, great, guys. Membership will come out. You can get involved. Then Jim got diagnosed with cancer. So what did these guys do in January of 2021? They went and reserved the name Ontario First at Elections Ontario. Okay? So it's been sitting there for 10 months, not doing anything with Elections Ontario, not getting registered. And then the federal election ends, and this Paul and his buddy Ken get back on the phone. Jim, we want to run for New Blue. We want to get involved. Okay, great, guys. I don't say anything. You guys went and registered a name for a political party behind my back. I don't say anything. I give them charity, right? People can change, Richard. That's the thing, right? People can change. Okay, fine. Yeah, let's get involved. A couple of New Blue people locally in their riding, we're helping them run federally, right? Taking time out of their day, spending money, resources, helping them federally. And they say they want to run provincially. But then Randy Hillier comes calling. So what do? 2 weeks after they tell me they want to run provincially, they go and they give the name to Randy to start a party. So my question is, if these deceivers get in power, imagine how they're going to deceive the Ontario public. Imagine, because that's all they do is they deceive. They say 1 minute they say I'm with New Blue, another minute they're with something else that looks prettier or because someone gave them instructions, and they can't handle the criticism. We got other guys on social media in direct messaging. They threaten me. You better not criticize Randy Hillier. Don't say the truth about Randy Hillier. Don't tell anyone that Randy's got a deal because you know it's true, but don't do it because we're going to come after you. But then when I publicize it, oh, that's terrible. How could you do that? You know what's funny about the whole thing, Wyatt, watching it unfold on Twitter? The attacks that are coming against me and my wife, it's the same script that the PCs used when they sued us in 2017 and when I ran for party president and they rigged it. It's the same exact script. It's like the lobbyist running the PC party, Nick Kuvalis, who's Randy's good friend, and in August he tweeted out, by the time Randy Hillier's finished with you, Jim, he tweeted out to me a threat. How did Nick know Randy was coming after me in August if Randy doesn't have a deal with the PCs? That's Ford's top pollster. It's like Randy went to Brian Patterson and said, give me that script that you guys were using to defame Jim and Belinda, because I got a political party now, and we're going to use the same script. But Randy won't do it, because in Randy's fights, he sends his daughter in to do the fighting. And Randy only does it privately. He picks up the phone and he smears. And he sends people to meetings in Niagara when Jim shows up, and he gets his agents to say to Jim in front of 100 people, how are you, Jim? What are you going to do for us to make sure that we don't run a candidate against your wife in Cambridge? Like, that's what these guys say. They threaten, which reveals the whole shot, Richard and Wyatt. It reveals the whole shot. They don't care about fighting the lockdown.
Right.
This is just a train for them to get some notoriety, because they're openly threatening to run someone against my wife, who's the only one of the 124 MPPs showing up to work regularly to challenge Doug Ford on all of his legislation, lockdown and not lockdown related. And they're threatening to run someone against my wife because they're trying to split the vote and save the Doug Ford PC party. That's what they're doing. He turned down a leadership race, and all they do is issue threats in secret, but they won't have a public debate. And that's what they're doing, because he has a deal with the PCs.
So Jim, we have great. Now I'm getting an echo on my end too. I don't know where this echo's coming from.
Is it me?
Maybe not. Okay.
It might be, but anyways, yeah. Sorry, back to what Richard, what you're going to get at.
So we have a great question from the audience. If Wyatt wants to cue it up from Bob Brown. Bob Brown in the audience is saying the Carhalioses haven't said or done squat against this COVID vaccine BS since they formed the New Blue Party. At least Randy's doing something. How would you answer that question?
Yeah, that's a good talking point, right, from the Twitter trolls. And I'm sure, unfortunately, Bob got that talking point. And when Bob realizes what's going on and he changes his mind, you can buy membership in the New Blue and vote for us. And he'll realize that I'm right. my wife has been the only one that's consistently gone to Queen's Park to stand up against Bill 195 on the lockdowns. She's the only one that's going consistently to oppose Bill 12 on mandatory vaccinations. You go down the list, every single bill that these guys put forward, she's there opposing and asking the tough questions. And it's not just on lockdowns or mandates. It's on electric vehicles, drug injection sites, carbon tax, the budget that's just getting blown out of proportion in terms of a spiraling deficit, no tax relief. My wife is the one that's going, even while I was in bed and in a wheelchair with cancer, we made sure and made arrangements that she can go to work because she's getting paid from taxpayers to do just that. The New Blue Party is the only one that's been holding Doug Ford's feet to the fire on lockdown and COVID mandates. And every time we do a call for action and attention is driven to the New Blue Party, Doug Ford moves to the right. So Belinda led the charge against Bill 12, guys. Do you remember that? You saw that, right? She led the charge against the bill that said you had to be vaccinated to work in healthcare and education. And the Ford PCs were saying they were in favor of employers putting in forced vaccinations. For months, we were saying we're going to put forward legislation and fines to oppose this. She led the charge. We did a call for action. People called their PC MPPs. On the day of the vote, the PC MPPs reversed their position. She got a lot of attention on social media because of Bill 12's defeat. Of course, the general media doesn't cover her because we're a threat. The next day, Doug Ford calls a press conference to say COVID restrictions are going to be temporary. All of a sudden, he remembered. Oh, yeah. No, he wanted to tell everyone these COVID restrictions, they're not permanent. He made up his mind, they're temporary. And it's not a coincidence that it was the day after Bill 12 was defeated. Randy Hillier said that was all political theater, that voting in the legislature, stopping a bill, forcing the PCs to switch their vote, that's all political theater. So Belinda supports Randy when he does constructive things. Randy Hillier has never supported Belinda or me or the New Blue Party for fighting corruption or fighting mandates or fighting this lockdown in a constructive way. The next thing she did was she went at Queen's Park the next week and she asked about drug injection sites in Cambridge. Then the week after that, she challenged them about a facility that's going up in Cambridge that's being fast-tracked through the zoning planning process, right, rumored to be for Amazon, who hired Doug Ford's campaign manager's lobbying firm to lobby for them a month before the Ford government agreed to fast-track it. The next day in the media, the Ford government released a letter saying that Cambridge City Council will have their zoning pulled for that unless they do proper consultation. Every time we do a call for action and people unify behind the New Blue and Belinda speaks out in Queen's Park, we see the Ford government moving to the right. When Randy announced his party, what happened that week when Randy announced his party? And there was confusion on the ground between Randy's supposed new party and New Blue. Doug Ford and Christine Elliott took the opportunity to say the capacity limits we were going to lift or raise this week, we're putting it off to January. I can plot on a chart for you every time we've succeeded in pushing back, Doug Ford switches his tune and changes his narrative. Every time Randy does something ridiculous and gets the anti-lockdown movement discredited, it gives room for Doug Ford to move to the left. That's how this has been going for a year.
Yeah, and the thing I feel like sort of hoodwinks people when it comes to people who are controlled opposition is that they tend to be the ones hosting tons of rallies. It's all rallies all the time. That's all they pretty much do. And people assume that they're gathering all these people in one area, so they must be doing something right. Like you and Belinda and the New Blue Party still do rallies, and you guys have had large rallies with thousands of people. But at the end of the day, after you leave a protest, you do something productive. You have people go and call their MPP, go and email their MPP. People should ask themselves, why is Randy Hillier not telling you to go after your MPP for not standing up for their rights? He's never telling you to do something productive. He just wants you wasting your Saturday following him to different places where he can yell in front of a school or something like that. There's never something actually productive happening. I just want to get back to sort of like the point of the show, the narrative, in talking about political strategy, optics, and organization.
Yeah, so let me talk about rallies. So I feel really bad to Bob because I hate saying this stuff because people see what's going on and I hate revealing the truth. But When I talked about Patrick Brown and I told everyone this is really bad news with Patrick Brown and I saw him going off the rails, no one wanted to believe it. And then eventually when they saw it go off the rails, I was right about Patrick Brown. In 2018, when I saw Doug Ford go sideways in the PC convention and rig it, and I warned people, Doug Ford, the PCs have been compromised. Doug Ford's going to go off the rails. No one wanted to believe me, and I was right about Doug Ford. I was right about Aaron O'Toole. I warned people. I was right about Aaron O'Toole. Some people said, no, I got to give Aaron O'Toole a chance. Now we see the disaster. I was right about Brown, Ford, O'Toole, and I'm right about Randy, and that's why we have the New Blue Party. And on rallies, Wyatt, I was in a hospital bed in a wheelchair for a year, 10 months, fighting this terrible cancer that I had. And there was never a call from Randy. There was never a public tweet saying, get better, Jim. Get better, Jim. The minute my wife, while I was not well, went to a rally in Waterloo that she got invited to, she got charged by police there. Of course, that doesn't make the news suspiciously. So conservatives are skeptical of the media, but why would we believe who the media puts forward as being the leader on the anti-lockdown activists? There must be a reason why the media is zeroing in on the one guy who makes the anti-lockdown movement look ridiculous, right? So rallies are great, Wyatt. Like we're not against rallies. That's not all political parties should be doing. There's ground game. There's grassroots activism. There's getting people elected. There's all kinds of, there's policy proposals being put forward, which we've been putting forward in our interviews. And Roman Baber committed his last private members bill opportunity, the same thing I was talking about for 2 months, which is making it against the law to let people lose their jobs. But when I got better in 10 months, back on my feet, I didn't lose my leg. I didn't lose my life. The same cancer that took Terry Fox's life. We got invited finally to speak at a rally at Waterloo. 2,500 people. 2,500 people came. But we don't just stop there. We advise people when it's necessary to push back and call their MPPs. I went to Ottawa for a rally a couple weekends ago. Randy Hillier tried to cancel me twice. It was down to the wire the day before. The organizers were like, come on, Randy, you can't cancel the guy. Like, he's a speaker. No, I don't want him. I went. I was expecting this huge, like Randy Hillier, right, in his backyard. 10,000 people, had a couple hundred people on the lawn of Parliament Hill. So he's committing all this time for 10 months just on rallies. He doesn't go to work. He's getting paid $116,000 to do a job at Queen's Park. He says, I don't want to do that. He's flying to Alberta to campaign federally. He doesn't want to do his job. So you'd figure that he's committing all his time at rallies, that when I go to a rally in Ottawa, there's going to be more than 300 or 400 people there, and half of them aren't going to be gym people. It's just in his backyard, for crying out loud. And he couldn't get more than 300 or 400 people to announce his big party. I'm looking around saying, what's this guy been doing for the last year?
Well, technically, that was a hijacked event, too.
Well, he's just going around getting churches and restaurants shut down and fined for the last year. He's not doing anything constructive. He's not going to Queen's Park. I don't get it, but I can tell you who's laughing about all this. It's Doug Ford and the lobbyists, Nick Kouvalis and Corey Tanaki. They love it because they've got finally another guy they cut a deal with out there pretending he's starting a party, distracting people from joining and unifying around New Blue. And so Randy's a secret agent, guys. And for a long time in Ontario politics, I didn't know how we're going to deal with this stuff. But if conservatism is going to succeed in Ontario, we got to talk about it and we got to put it all on the table. And it's all public stuff. I'm not saying stuff that's hidden.
The thing is, like Richard, like you've run campaigns before. Jim, you've of course run campaigns before. It's really difficult to actually organize a broad-based campaign that can actually win, even just win in a singular riding. And I find it so silly that so many people are thinking, no, Randy Hillier, despite the fact that it's only 6 months before an election, he doesn't have a lot of time. He's going to organize a party. He's going to organize EDAs in every single Ontario riding, and he's going to have a better organized party than Jim Karahalios, the guy who did the Take Back Our PC Party organization and Axe the Carbon Tax movement, which was pretty much why so many conservatives before 2019 actually became anti-carbon tax. It was actually kind of a controversial issue before then. Look,
who knows, Wyatt? Like, it's up to the voters at the end of the day. I can only tell you, like, there's no guarantees. I don't know I know we have a good shot to win in Cambridge and get Belinda reelected. I know that we have riding associations registered or the paperwork's ready to go, and half of them have already been registered. We're pretty close to covering all the ridings. I mean, the PPC doesn't even have riding associations in every riding. We've got a constitution, principles, mission statement. The PPC doesn't have those things. we wanted to make sure that when we sell a membership to a party, you're signing up for something, right? Like you're not just signing up for the New Blue logo and Jim and Belinda. There's a board. We've got a founding board with officers and a president. We've got the New Blue Ontario Fund, which is a not-for-profit corporation to handle donations with best practices in terms of not-for-profit law and elections Ontario. We've got a constitutional place. We're building something long-term. So we're behind the 8 ball a bit because I was sick. And others jumped on the advocacy train for different reasons. And I don't know what their reasons are. I know what Randy's reasons are. And we weren't able to do as much as we wanted to for 8 or 10 months. And some, mean-spirited people say, oh, that just proves, how dare you, Jim, fight cancer for the last 8 months? You should have been rolling out in a wheelchair at those rallies. You should have been doing that. Well, my wife kept going to Queen's Park when I wasn't feeling well. And we built the party up, and we've got riding associations registered in over 110 ridings. The paperwork's ready to go. And we're shortly going to be putting out the word for candidates, and we're going to have a great platform, and it's being developed in consultation with membership and presidents. And it's going to be great. And the reality is it's not just a political party for the next 6 months. It's a political party for the long-term longevity of right-of-center politics in Ontario. And we're going to train people on how to campaign, how to be candidates, how to run riding associations, so that one day when I retire, we have people that believe and are committed to these principles, still fighting and channeling all this energy into a right-of-center party. And if we don't have that, and we just have 4 establishment parties on the left, it's a runaway train on the left with policy. And we know where we're going. We know our skills. We know what we've done before. And we know the challenges. And I'm kind of flattered, actually, guys, that the PCs got Randy out there starting a new party with Color Purple. Because if we weren't a threat, this wouldn't happen, right? And if we weren't a threat, Randy would say, yeah, let's just do a leadership race and take over the New Blue Party, which is already set up. And if we weren't a threat, they wouldn't want to be starting this party, or they wouldn't be saying to me, what if we run a candidate against your wife, Jim, in Cambridge? What are you going to do then? So let them bring in a candidate. The Liberals have figured out in Cambridge, they don't have a candidate in Cambridge against my wife yet. I don't think. Maybe they just put one up in a week. They figured it out. They can't find any Liberal in Cambridge to run against my wife, because they know when you run against Jim's wife, Jim's going to give you a rough campaign. Like Jim's going to give you what Stephanie Levitz of the Canadian Press said, an aggressive campaign. And when I've seen all that my wife goes through in politics, standing up for what's right and standing up for the people and sticking to it and sticking to me, and I see all our supporters, I'm going to defend my wife, and I'm going to defend all our candidates. And it's going to be a rough campaign for people who threaten my wife and who come into Cambridge. And those candidates that, told me they wanted to run for the New Blue, Wyatt, and now in a couple months, they change their mind. They say, nah, now I'm going to be Color Purple, and we're going to get the Prince soundtrack, and we're going to play Prince. They might get away with it this time, but then when they go back to federal campaigning the next time, maybe the New Blue will run candidates against them federally. Who knows? Because I got a lot of supporters across Canada who remember me from the leadership race, and they're sitting back and they're like, that guy Jim, he was right about Erin O'Toole, and we'll see how the New Blue Party does. And it's really a shame, you guys watching Erin O'Toole, that tire fire federally with Erin O'Toole. It's really a shame that this one staffer in the PPC, Daniel Tyre, whose job it is to get candidates in every riding across Canada, to get a PPC constitution up and running, to get some principles in place, to look at the platform and say, how can it be better? Instead of focusing on federal politics, he's out there getting upset because I called him Daniel Tiger. So for
your daughter did.
my son. So for crying out loud, Daniel Tyre, just play the Katy Perry soundtrack Roar, get back up to speed, Eye of the Tiger, whatever, and focus on federal politics. Get ready, because the next election is going to come at any time. And maybe you guys will win a seat next time. Instead of monkeying around in provincial politics, backtracking on your word, betraying what you said about an informal alliance, and supporting a party that doesn't even follow the brand. For crying out loud, wouldn't it be great if every employee in the PPC was focusing on federal politics?
One thing I want to just sort of clear up about the PPC, the sort of this angle about it, because I think some people are probably confused. Like, does this PPC endorse Randy Hillier's party? Does Maxime Bernier endorse Randy Hillier's party? Because a lot of people will probably do whatever Max thinks is right in this case because they've been following the PPC for a few years. But it's been complete radio silence from Maxime Bernier on the Ontario First Party. Usually, if like the PPC tweets out a video of a great PPC candidate or something and whatnot, both the PPC Twitter account, the Facebook page, and the Maxime Bernier Twitter accounts and Facebook pages will also tweet that out. But that's not what happened. You had sort of this awkward, oh, the purple wave is coming to Ontario, guys, from the PPC main account. And then Maxime Bernier is still just tweeting about his vacation because, well, you guys, he's on vacation. That's fine. But it's sort of oddly disconnected from Maxime Bernier, this entire PPC thing. And I wonder why people don't find this sort of suspicious that Maxime Bernier isn't getting behind Randy. Like, Randy's trying super hard to make it seem like he is by tweeting out pictures of him standing next to Maxime from months ago. But it doesn't actually prove that Maxime even knows what Randy's up to.
So, you know, I didn't really know Max Bernier when he was running in the federal conservative leadership. I was running the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign. He had Tony Clement on his team, who's good friends with Brian Patterson. You guys remember Tony Clement? His career ended because he was sending pictures of himself to the Ivory Coast, naked pictures of himself to the Ivory Coast. That's how Tony Clement's career ended. And then he didn't like me, so Tony Clement didn't want Axe the Carbon Tax anywhere near the Max Bernier campaign. And then Max had Corey Tenike as his head strategist, the same campaign manager, lobbyist for Doug Ford. And Max had his campaign chair, Patrick Brown's good buddy, Alex Nuttall. So I was kind of weary of like Max's campaign for leader. I'm like, he's got a bunch of guys that I don't really like, right? But he narrowly lost that race. And then I got to know Max after they kicked me out of the federal leadership. Not really well. A couple of times we spoke. He asked me to run for the PPC in the election. I said, I'm sick with cancer. I can't. I'm in a wheelchair. And then after the federal election, he came out and him and Martin Mass told the media, we got an informal alliance with the New Blue. We got an informal alliance with the New Blue. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. You got an informal alliance. I knew we were friendly. I knew you guys were supportive of what we were doing. I knew you guys didn't want me to use the name and the colors because why mix the brands, right? Different levels of government. But then there's this guy, Daniel Tyre, and his job is to go get candidates. That's his job for the PPC. And he failed in the last election. He couldn't get all the candidates lined up. And they didn't have candidates in every riding. His job's to put together a constitution for the PPC because there's people that bought memberships at PPC. There's no constitution. There's no party president. There's no board, right? And so Daniel's looking at this and he sees all these candidates like Bumbling Brian in Southwestern Ontario and Sill next door. And they're going around in the federal campaign to New Blue donors and they're saying, you know, give me money. I'm running federally and I'm going to support the New Blue when the provincial election rolls around. And Daniel sees this and he sees, you know, these guys, they want to run for the New Blue. And Jim's pretty good at this stuff. And he's not sick from cancer anymore. He's cancer free and he's back on his feet. And Jim and Belinda are getting 2,500 people at a rally in Waterloo. We never got 2,500 people at a rally for Randy. And he's getting nervous, right? And so this guy, Daniel, goes, my job's on the line because if these PPC candidates, they go and they run for the New Blue and they win, or they do better running in the New Blue than they do running in the PPC, then some of these candidates are going to say, I'm just going to stick to provincial politics. And then Daniel is going to get fired from his job. That's the problem. So Daniel cocks up this scheme to work with Randy Hillier, who's got a secret deal with Doug Ford, to put up this color purple party that doesn't even say PPC or People's Party. And they don't care. Daniel doesn't care what happens in Ontario politics because he only cares about federal politics. And he's got a nice subsidy now from the federal government because the PPC did a little better. So he's got a nice cushy job and he doesn't care what goes on in conservative politics in Ontario. So if they're making it harder for New Blue and harder for Belinda to get reelected, they don't care. They don't care. And so that's the problem. He's got the Twitter handle while Max is on vacation and he's tweeting out these terrible videos from Ontario First. Terrible. Like, what's the quality of these videos for a party that's not even set up? and he's retweeting it, and he's deceiving people into thinking that this is PPC Ontario, the same way that guy Paul deceived in saying, I'm going to run for the New Blue, and deceived New Blue supporters into helping him, and then registered the Ontario first name. The same way that they've been deceiving, Randy's been deceiving on his rebuttals and to the article that Wyatt posted, and saying he doesn't go to Queen's Park because he can't wear a mask, but then he gets to Alberta. How did he get to Alberta? I'm still waiting for an answer. Does anyone watching have an answer for how Randy got to Alberta but he can't get to Queen's Park to vote?
Just to answer your question on how the I'm not sure it wasn't a question, whatever. You just said something about the Ontario Party's videos just being very low quality. Well, I know why they're low quality, or sort of know why they're low quality, and it's because it looks the exact same way as the Canada First videos look that they post. The sort of like glitchy sort of graphics and whatnot, and trying to appeal to this very Gen Z sort of crowd. It's the exact same thing. And it doesn't surprise me that some of the PPC candidates who Daniel Tyre took over to, Daniel Tyre took PPC candidates to the Canada First Political Action Committee's event that they had, or whatever, their CPAC event that they had, CFPAC, in Ontario the day before the July 1st celebrations this year. So it doesn't surprise me that they're having so much crossover with this sort of alt-right organization, when there's so many people who are behind the Ontario First Party who retweet that organization, who talk to people in that organization, who attend that organization's events. It's ridiculous.
I don't know
how no one's really catching on to those.
Is it the guy that threw the rocks that was managing
Chelsea
riding?
Yeah. Chelsea Hillier, one of her campaign workers, was the guy who threw that handful of rocks and gravel at Justin Trudeau. He's good friends with Tyler Russell, who organizes and runs Canada First.
No one cares who these guys are. I saw that one guy at the Waterloo rally came up to me at CF on his hat. He took a picture. Then my team said, look at that hat he's wearing. I don't know what CF is. I don't know what this stuff is. I don't know who these guys are. I just know that they're guys that are running around with skinny jeans saying we need a military revolution. And then you offer them a leadership race and they can't handle it. Oh, no, we can't have a leadership race. That's crazy. Real tough guys, right? Like real tough guys. And they lose their mind when Jim does a couple tweets and comments in an article, and they're making fun of Wyatt on Twitter, but they can't do a leadership race. But they're out there throwing rocks and calling for military revolutions. These guys, if there was a revolution, be crying to mommy with their skinny jeans saying, get my baseball hat, hide me under the bed. But these guys are real tough, right? So I guess if that's who Randy's got in his party, and that's who's lining up with the marijuana advocate and the anti-oil sands advocate and the former Liberal and Daniel Tyre, if that's who's got Randy's ear for a new party, good luck to Randy. But I know what Randy has. He's got to deal with the PCs, and he's got the entire government apparatus and all those lobbyists with all that left-wing money. And he talks to them, like he said to me in July of 2020, I'm good friends with Nick Kouvalis. I talk to Nick all the time. And then Nick's threatening me on Twitter. And Paul Calander's a great House leader. He's just the greatest. And he's got that behind him. But I know what we got. We got our supporters. Our supporters are not the ones throwing rocks at buses. Our supporters are not the ones making the anti-lockdown and anti-mandate movement look ridiculous. Our supporters have seen me and Belinda be right about Patrick Brown, be right about Doug Ford, be right about Aaron O'Toole, and be right about Randy Hillier. And they're the supporters that you like to call in right-of-center politics a silent majority. And they come out and vote, and they support. And when we need riding presidents, they sign up in every riding. And that's what we're building. And it's long-term, and it's tough because we're not going to get the media talking about us the way Randy gets them talking about us, because we're not going to discredit the movement and look like do provocative things to apologize a few days later with our tail between our legs because we're trying to make the Ford government look good, which is what Randy's doing. We're not doing that. And so it's going to take more time to build the party from the ground up. It's not going to be fancy air wars. It's not going to be fancy press conferences. And it's not going to be rally after rally every day where we're going to be chugging beer on the campaign trail and waking up with a hangover the next morning. We want sophisticated people running in our in ridings across Ontario that are going to put forward good ideas. And they're not going to make up excuses and lie on Twitter about what they really think. And they're not going to do private smear campaigns, but then cry foul when public debates happen. We want people of substance. And if you run for the New Blue Party, you can rest assured one thing. The leader of this party, which is me, and the reason why I'm the leader, guys, is because my wife doesn't want to be the leader. And Randy Hillier said, I don't want to be the leader. So when we submitted the paperwork, someone's got to be the leader. But this leader is going to do one thing. I'm going to defend my wife to threats of purple parties running a candidate against her. And I'm going to defend every single candidate that puts their name on a ballot for the New Blue Party. I'm going to defend them before I defend myself. I'm not going to be a coward like Doug Ford and Randy Hillier and throw people under the bus or make them go out on Twitter and do the debating for me. Because that's the old tire fire way of doing politics. And in the modern age, everyone can figure out who's saying what. So there's not going to be whisper smear campaigns from me. If you want to come after my wife or you want to come after one of a candidate for the New Blue Party and smear them in private or in public, you will get from me, the leader of the New Blue Party, blunt force political trauma. And that's what you're going to get. And so enough with the smearing. You guys want to have a public debate. You guys get your party set up. The Ontario Last Party finally gets set up in 3 or 4 months. You want to have a Democratic Party. Maybe we'll have a leadership, Richard. We can have a leadership race, but this time it's going to be in the Ontario Last Party, and I'm going to run. And I'm going to run on one platform commitment, and that's going to be, as leader of the Ontario Last Party, I'm going to fold the Ontario Last Party. I'm going to put it into the ground so we can have one unified right of center choice against the 4 establishment parties, and that's the New Blue Party of Ontario.
Okay, Jim, if we have time for one last question, we have a really good, really nice question from Allison Marie. She says, what was that lockdown caucus thingy anyway? I noticed Randy put that out after New Blue was born. And why does Randy drag those pastors around? Is he suddenly a Christian or something? Talk about convenient timing.
So these poor pastors, right? They couldn't open up their churches. And so there was a group of them that met with Belinda in southwestern Ontario before she got kicked out of caucus, because no PC MPP would meet with these pastors. And it wasn't just pastors, it was professionals, it was Christian professionals. So Belinda went all the way to, I think, to Sarnia and had a meeting with them before she got kicked out. And they were explaining to her the devastating impact that the lockdowns were having on their businesses, on their churches, and on their people. And they said to Belinda, you need to stand up for us. Randy Hillier wouldn't meet with them, nowhere to be found. No PC MPP in southwestern Ontario would go near them. Max Bernier wouldn't go near them. I guess he was busy. And Derek Sloan was still in the Conservative caucus. So Belinda went and met with him. She decided to vote against the lockdown bill. And then we both went and met with him again. And I had this terrible pain in my leg. And I just thought I can't remember when the diagnosis for the tumor was coming. It was supposed to get confirmed. We met with them and we announced the New Blue Party, and they said, we're on side. This is great. New Blue Party. We love it. We need another option. We're all on side. And then I got sick and I was doing chemo sessions and I couldn't go meet with the pastors, and Belinda didn't have time to meet because she was running from Queen's Park to pick up our 5-year-old from school, 4-year-old at the time, and to take care of me. And so what did Randy do? Randy heard that we were meeting with these pastors and he rushed over to southwestern Ontario and he had a meeting, and they created, on the same day they had a meeting that Belinda got 2 days notice to attend to and couldn't make it because I wasn't well. They created the End the Lockdown Caucus, and they said, Jim's not invited. Okay, Jim's not invited. No problem. Sorry, guys, we're starting a new political party. We don't know how this thing that you guys started, that you claim Randy's in charge of, how it's going to unfold. Are you guys, and I knew that Randy had a secret deal, and I thought, Randy's going to do some stuff here that's going to make their End the Lockdown Caucus look bad. And so we wished them luck, and we, let them go on their merry way, and we kept building the party. And the whole time we're waiting for a year, Richard. I'm waiting for these pastors to say nice things about Belinda, right? We're pro-life. Belinda stands up for things that they have in common with these pastors. And Randy used to make fun of these types of Christians, these pastors, when they would, for example, oppose Kathleen Wynne's sex ed curriculum. He would call people like that outcasts who deserve to be in the wilderness of politics. So it was a funny kind of combination that we're seeing there. But, to each their own. I had other issues at the time, like making sure I was able to become cancer-free. But the pastors want to talk the truth. They want politicians who speak the truth. But they don't like it when I speak the truth. And we warned them about Randy. We warned them. And we said, Randy is a social liberal. He's not much of a conservative. He's a progressive. And they assured us that Randy Hillier is not going to start a political party. He didn't want to start a political party. He's done with provincial politics. Well, we've seen where that's come forward. They didn't want us to be part of the lockdown caucus. We haven't gotten really much support from them in the New Blue Party. But we wish them the best. And we hope they'll come around and see the light and accept the truth. And we know that there are people across southwestern Ontario where most of them have their churches are going to be voting for the New Blue Party. Is that address the question from Allison Marie?
No, I think that does a pretty good job. Yeah. Unless you want to talk about Randy's supposed conversion, but I don't think we should ever get into that, really.
I don't know. Everyone's individual. Look, I grew up an Orthodox Christian and my wife's Catholic. And I remember reading history books about, the women they have on the person's case, the statue of Parliament Hill, the left of the liberal women on the person's case. They didn't want Greeks, blacks, and Jews in the country back then. And so I know the history of where that kind of thinking comes. But I can tell you, as an Orthodox Christian and my wife a Catholic, we were raised by middle-class parents, very modest. And we don't like to, I don't like to use my faith to get votes. Like, I'm just not comfortable with it. I like to talk about policies and issues. And so, unfortunately, it's interesting to see Randy Hillier, who used to make fun of people that oppose the sex ed curriculum, who is a progressive. Now he tweets out pro-life stuff because he needs the support. And I guess, it's convenient. It's really, really convenient that after the New Blue Party started, Randy realized there was a lockdown. Randy realized he cared about the lockdown, not enough to go to Queen's Park and vote, but enough to fly to Alberta and campaign. And he realized he cared about federal politics. And when that didn't work out, he realized, I like provincial politics too. And I like activism. And he realized he's pro-life. And he realized he's some kind of Christian. He realized all these things, but only after the New Blue Party of Ontario came out. It's amazing how people realize these things when Belinda and I do great work.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably a great place to end this discussion. Maybe we'll have you back some other day on the narrative to talk more about the New Blue Party and how the Ontario election is going once we get a little bit closer to that date. But I think it's maybe you want to tell people what you're up to in this next week or so with the New Blue Party and what they can look out for if they're in Ontario.
Candidate applications going up. So the candidates, people that have been looking to apply, we're going to finish registering the rest of the riding associations. We're hard at work on a platform. We got a huge mailer that went out with a beautiful newsletter, membership cards for our members, thousands of donors and supporters and members across the province. We're ready to go. While other people are just getting started and they want to start all over again, we're ready to go. And the last two things that we need is candidates in every riding and to unveil the platform in a smart way. And it's going to be a right-of-center platform. It's going to be a principled platform. And it's going to hold Doug Ford and the PCs to account and change the narrative in Ontario. And so if anyone watching wants to run, look out for the candidate application. And if you want your voices heard, buy a membership and get involved in the New Blue Party.
Well, thanks for coming on, Jim. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone back here next week, probably on a Friday again. If not, we'll let you know if it's a Thursday ahead of time. And until then, we'll